The weight of secrets Kerrington had carried for years finally felt unbearable. Each day since Olivia was born, she'd shielded her daughter from the truth, spun her life carefully around her marriage to David, and buried the past with Ethan, but the walls around her life was closing in and it was time for a reckoning. Kerrington took a deep breath, sitting on the edge of her bed, preparing herself for the hardest conversation of her life. She'd asked Olivia to come straight home early from work and waited until David returned. Ethan, knowing how much this confession would shake her, had offered to come by for support. He sat in the living room, his presence both comforting and painfully symbolic of their past mistakes. Once Olivia made it home, she looked at Ethan sitting oddly on the couch in the living room. She didn't really think too much about it, just thought that either it was a close friend of her mom's or a client. Olivia went into the kitchen where Kerrington was standing and grabbed a juice out of the refrigerator. "What's going on?" she asked. "We're waiting on your father, Kerrington." David finally pulled into the driveway as the headlights were beaming into the front window of the living room. Ethan frantically sprung from the sofa and stood up straight. Kerrington walked out of the kitchen to the living room and gazed into Ethan's eyes. Olivia stood in one spot, staring at both Kerrington and the man standing awkwardly in her living room. David walked up the driveway and put his key into the front door and slowly turned the knob to open. There, he was greeted by Kerrington, standing like a statue in the foyer. Kerrington slowly forced a quick smile on her face as David fully opened the door, and completely, there he was, surprised to see Olivia and an unknown man standing slightly over to his left. David asked, "Carrie, what's going on? Who is this?" As he looks towards Ethan, he pauses again and says, "Hey, Olivia." David begins to sit his bag down and stare directly at Kerrington with confusion on his face. Olivia is in the background asking, again, "Mom, what is going on?" Kerrington begins to speak, and very lightly, above a whisper, she introduces Ethan to David and asks for everyone to have a seat. Everyone begins to stare at each other oddly as they all decide to sit down. Kerrington's hands begins to tremble as she watched them settle across from her. Ethan crosses over to stand with Kerrington and Olivia. They both look concerned, sensing her mother's distress, and David's expression darkened with tension hanging in the air. She couldn't delay it any longer. "I have to tell you both something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Kerrington began, and her voice was shaky. "David, this is Ethan, and I met him back in college during my junior year. Before we got married, I got pregnant with Olivia before graduation, and I told you that Olivia was yours." Kerrington proceeded to turn to look at Olivia. "Olivia, this is Ethan, and he's your biological father. He's here to get to know you, and he had no idea of you being his daughter until his visit to Atlanta. I had kept this from him as well. He had no idea you even existed, so please do not be upset with him. Honey, we all know that David is your father, but Ethan is your dad. He deserves the right to know and to develop some sort of relationship with you. But only if you want." Kerrington, with tears in her eyes, looked on to Olivia, hoping for a sign of approval. With no hesitation, Kerrington told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Ethan had dropped by his side to embrace with Kerrington's hand for comfort. She grabbed his hand and held on for dear life. The silence that followed felt suffocating. David's face twisted with anger and betrayal, while Olivia's expression shifted from confusion to shock. Her daughter's eyes welled up, her voice quivering. "You lied to me my whole life." "Olivia, Kerrington reached out, but Olivia pulled away, storming up the stairs to her room. The sound of her door slamming echoed through the house, cutting Kerrington to the core. David rose from the sofa, his face a mask of fury. How could you? How could you hide something like this?" His voice was ice cold, and Kerrington felt the sting of every word. "David, please," she tried to explain, but he cut her off, his voice rising. Ethan tried to say something, but David immediately cut him off, enraged with fury, yelled at Ethan, and told him to get the hell out of his home. Ethan let go of Kerrington's hand as she looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "I trusted you," David yelled. "We built a life together, and you hid this from me this entire time for 20 goddamn years. You bitch. I don't even know who you are." He turned and walked up the stairs, leaving her standing there feeling exposed and shattered. Ethan remained watching the scene unfold, but he knew his presence was only adding to the pain. He wrapped his arms around Kerrington to ease her pain. "Everything will be okay, Carrie. I'm here for you. David will get over it and Olivia will come around. I promise you," he said. Quietly, he left, mouthing a soft "I'm sorry" to Kerrington before closing the door behind him. Kerrington was left in the living room alone and heartbroken. That night, she decided to sleep in the guest room in order to give David and Olivia some space. Kerrington picked up the phone to find comfort in Jake. In the days that followed, David went to work and didn't return home. Kerrington went through the motions trying to hold herself together, but each morning she woke to Olivia's cold silence and David's absence, a constant reminder of how deeply her secrets had torn her family apart. As if her life wasn't unraveling enough, Marcus' behavior took a darker turn. He had been reaching out constantly since their last meeting at the hotel, and his messages filled with accusations and desperation. Finally, one afternoon, he showed up at Kerrington's office, causing a scene in front of her staff. He shouted, calling out her name, and just humiliating her in a way that left her exposed and vulnerable. But he didn't stop there. He found a way to contact David, revealing their affair in explicit detail of how and when he made love to Kerrington, and left message after message, having little to no imagination. Kerrington felt her world collapse yet again, but she had no strength left to chase Marcus down to confront him. She knew her marriage was completely over, whatever left of it was anyway. Meanwhile, Jake, who had been devastated by the night they spent together, promised to stay by Kerrington's side, whatever the fallout would be. He and Kerrington talked for hours the night she finally told the truth. He had always been there for her, and despite the hurt, he was determined to protect her for as long as he could. The affair is unlike her attraction to Marcus. Jake knows her history intimately, making this a betrayal that hits closer to home. It brings a new layer of emotional complexity as Kerrington finds herself loving the comfort Jake offers and his presence, which makes her feel completely safe. Despite the risk, their bond feels natural, and it's a connection Kerrington finds hard to resist. The mystery of the text from dinner with Ethan had lingered at the back of Kerrington's mind. She had brushed it off, thinking it was some random prank or mistake, but now everything started to come together. The messages, the accusations, they pointed to someone who knew her life far too well. While David was away from the house, Kerrington decided to do a little digging through David's things. It had to be a reason he had been so distant for months. But she was so wrapped up in her own secrets that she hadn't noticed David's transgressions. Kerrington knew David wasn't as squeaky clean as he portrayed himself to be. The revelation forces her to confront her own choices and consider how deeply both she and David had drifted apart. And that's when she discovered the truth. While going through David's emails on his desktop computer in his home office, Kerrington finds an old email message from Rachel in late summer, asking David to send her money for someone named Dominic. The email further begins to explain what she needed it for and how she is so tired of not hearing from him. She demanded more of his time, or he would know what the consequence would be. What the hell? Kerrington gasped. It was now coming to light that Rachel had been involved with David for years, lurking in the shadows, a secret of his own that he'd managed to keep hidden. And now it seemed that their relationship never ended, and Dominic is the offspring of their tumultuous affair. Now armed with the knowledge of David's affair, Kerrington faces a dilemma. Should she confront David directly or use this information to her advantage? The message from Rachel has shifted the dynamics of their marriage, placing Kerrington in a powerful but precarious situation. She realizes that her marriage is now built on secrecies of betrayals, with both she and David entangled in dangerous lies. Ethan, feeling the weight of the situation, arranged to meet with Olivia privately. They met at a park where he tried to explain everything, promising her that he would be there for her, despite his plans to leave Atlanta. Kerrington, knowing this was their moment, she gave her final goodbye to Ethan. As she walked him away, she felt an ache of finality, but knew that her focus needed to be on mending her relationship with Olivia, no matter how long it took. But David remained missing, hiding in a hotel somewhere, refusing to face what had come to light. But David remained missing, hiding in a hotel somewhere, refusing to face what had come to light. When he finally called, his voice was empty. "I can't come back to this, Kerrington. I want a divorce. You kept too many secrets." She let the words settle, her heart breaking all over again, but there was a bitter irony. Kerrington knew the truth about Rachel and felt the sting of betrayal, knowing that David had secrets of his own. Kerrington decided not to say anything to David about what she discovered over the phone. Instead, Kerrington politely said, "David, I'll see you when you get home. And yes, I agree." When David finally came home, Kerrington was waiting for him, ready to expose the truth he had been hiding. Her voice was steady, her anger raw and unfiltered. She walked into the living room, meeting David at the front door. With a stern voice, Kerrington says, "So, Rachel, you and her never broke it off. All these years, David? And is Dominic your son? Don't you dare lie to me. The truth," now she yelled. David's face went pale, his massive anger falling away as Kerrington laid out everything she knew. There was no redemption in his eyes. No apology strong enough to erase the damage. How? How did you find out, Carrie? Let me explain." "No. You don't get to explain anything to me. Nothing needs to be explained. I know everything, David. I called Rachel, and she and I had a long conversation. Rachel has spilled everything to me, so there is no explanation needed from you. We both deserve better. We both have been wrong, so let's just leave it peacefully. I don't want you to, and you obviously don't want me. Let's just be done. I'm tired of lying to each other, and all this time I thought I was the one that was wrong, but you have been with her since the early part of our marriage. You talked about counseling, and all this time during our sessions, you were still with her, and not only that, you have a child with her. Your sorry ass hid all this all these years, so I'm done. David said dramatically, "You're done?" He screamed, "Carrie, you have been with other men. You have been distant. You never want me to touch you, and you're always going to the office. What the hell do you think is going to happen? What the fuck do you mean? Olivia is not even mine." No, you don't dare. You don't get to sit up here and make accusations to me, she cried out. All this shit is because of you, David. You did this to us, you and your affair. And the affair you never ended, but you led me to believe that you did. You had me feeling broken and unworthy. So, yes, I got what I needed from others, and I apologize for keeping that secret from you, but that was before we got married. What you did was during our marriage. David looked at Kerrington with despair and walked over towards her, but just then, before he took another step to Olivia, she came running down the stairs. What is going on? Why is this happening? Please stop fighting. David and Kerrington both stopped and looked at Olivia with sorrow. David picked up his keys and walked out the door as it slammed behind him. Kerrington and Olivia was left standing in the living room, staring at each other with tears falling down their faces. At that moment, all they could do was embrace each other for comfort. David and Kerrington's lives were now irrevocably broken and damaged, shattered by the years of deception, by the weight of lies they both carried. The reckoning had come, and all that was left was for Kerrington to pick up the pieces alone, but stronger, knowing the truth would no longer be her prison.